Windows on the World live every Sunday, 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Join me, Mark Windows, and Tony Hurst. Join the conversation in our chat box and also catch up with life-changing information on our continuous programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Welcome to Windows on the World. Now, Alison Shablow is a singer, songwriter and performer, and she wrote some satirical songs about revisionist history and the event that we're not allowed to question without being called deniers. You know the one, it's called the Holocaust. Now, the video of her song Survivors was uploaded by a third party to YouTube in a different country, Switzerland, and this eventually led to a private prosecution by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, which actually should be renamed the Campaign for Anti-Semitism, as it spends its time looking for it and finding things to be offended about wherever they can. Now, recently they got David Icke's talk pulled from Manchester United football ground, and in Alison's case, a private prosecution was brought by Gideon Falter of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, and the case was eventually taken over by the CPS. One judge recused herself because of her Israeli ties. That was Lady Arbuthnot. She'd been on the receiving end of a free trip to Israel through her connections to the Friends of Israel. Now, we've done two shows on this. One's called UK Crown, Prosecuting Satire. That was earlier this year. And one called Anti-Semitism Harassment Campaign and the Law, and you can find those on YouTube and on windowsontheworld.net. Now, this is an ongoing saga, and we're going to catch up with the latest from Alison.
So give us a very brief introduction as to what happened.
Well, I've been a target of the Israel lobby for a number of years. It started off with my support for the pro-Palestinian cause, and it culminated, in 2015, I did a show in Edinburgh, at the Edinburgh Fringe. My abusers tried to get my show banned, but failed. I gave them a big up yours with a Quinnell salute in front of Edinburgh
Now,
Castle.
Alison, I just need to clarify something here, because this is a very small group, isn't it? We're not talking about hundreds of people who turned up and protested, are we?
Oh no, I did a full run of shows, and the Edinburgh Fringe rebuffed these demands that my show be withdrawn. So that was a victory for me. And this had already been going on for a couple of years. I'd already lost one contract because of these people. But from then,
now let's just take it back for people who don't know, Alison, because you uploaded a song to YouTube called Survivors, and it was a bit of, well, it was very forceful Mickey taking of alleged
that's right.
survivors.
Well, that's a direct result of this Edinburgh Fringe, because since then, since 2015, I became a target of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. And at the same time, police were, in fact, investigating on my behalf because I'd been receiving anonymous posts to my door, catalogues and unsigned birthday cards. Police were investigating. The year later, I was going to Edinburgh again to perform these songs, including the song called Survivors. And this time, my abusers managed to get my show shut down. And at that time, there were two particular troll accounts on Twitter, and we know who these people are now. The police at that stage, still investigating the anonymous postal deliveries that I've been receiving at my home, they agreed to widen their investigation to include these trolls who were clearly trying to stop me making a living as a musician. And particularly in respect to these songs that I'd written. There are five.
I just wanted to clarify this as well, is that these two Twitter trolls, were these the same people who were harassing you from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism?
One of them is the director of investigations and enforcement, Stephen Silverman, and he admitted that in papers delivered to the court a year ago.
Well, that's very barefaced to do that. I mean, the other thing is that sending things to your home address, I mean, it's...
That's not the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Right, I don't think that's the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism.
No, but
that's another group.
This, isn't it? It's people who've got on the back of it. Now,
Yes.
The thing is, this is all about really incitement, isn't it? I mean, they could say that what you did was incitement in that that people may have been offended, but that's their right. That no one's got the right not to be offended. Nobody can actually say that they have a right to be offended or to feel offence, because offence can be taken but not really given. It's up to the individual whether they take offence, and this is the most important thing. Now, your songs are quite provocative, and I can understand if people believe a certain historical narrative that it would get up their noses. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt that they would get a bit miffed about it. But the point is that how does this tie into a criminal offence? Because this is the thing that they're having a problem with, isn't it?
Yes, and there's the double standards, Mark.
Yes.
I've been researching quite a lot, preparing, for what's about to come next month with my trial. There are certain figures we can talk about people like Sacha Baron Cohen and throw the Jew down the well. Okay, that's one thing. But we have also Gentiles in the entertainment industry, British Gentiles. I'm thinking of Ricky Gervais and his former sidekick, Carl Pilkington, who have both made, in my view, comments, jokes, remarks that are equally, if not more, controversial.
I think you've brought
up
a very good point there, Alison, because it's all about context. It's all about interpretation, isn't it? Within show business, it's allowed for a certain amount of satire because it's kind of portrayed in an opposite way. It's almost portrayed as reinforcing the narrative, if you see what I mean. In other words, it kind of promotes the cause, whereas what you're doing would undermine the cause. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Well, perhaps, but perhaps I'm too, I don't know, simple-minded to see the difference when Ricky Gervais makes a joke about a whoopee cushion factory in Schindler's List 2, and I sing about Schindler's List in one of my songs. But simply, putting down the facts, as with Carl Pilkington, who compared his TV series An Idiot Abroad, he said that his experience was similar to that of Anne Frank. Now, my song in Survivors, I talk about Anne Frank and the fact that now her book, or what is considered to have always been her book, is now co-authored by her father. So who did in fact write this book? And
well, he's kind of admitted that as well, hasn't he?
Is it more offensive for me to state, oh well, now the book has two authors, Anne and Otto Frank, or is it Carl Pilkington who says that his very well paid job where he toured around the world and had, presumably was very well paid for what he did, compared his experience to Anne Frank, who ended up in Bergen-Belsen and died of typhus. I'm conflicted with these issues of why. First of all, why are they targeting me, a middle-aged, educated woman, soul performer? I can't see that my songs have caused the people who are accusing me any harm, injury or loss, whereas Gervais can get away with it. He still does Holocaust and I think paedophile material in his stand-up shows. He has 12.9 million Twitter followers. Well, perhaps the campaign against anti-Semitism saw somebody like me as a softer target, as a way to bring in legislation which would effectively criminalise, as is the case in Germany, France, etc., all places, pretty much all European EU countries and others, to bring in some kind of legislation which criminalises questioning of the Holocaust, mocking of the so-called crimes against humanity, to be able to, I think, as I said in the little clip we did earlier this year, to justify, not only to justify the existence of the State of Israel, but to also justify globalization, mass immigration, and the New World Order. That's
the bigger picture. That's the whole
bigger
thing.
picture,
and that's where the bigger picture leads. And a lot of people might get a bit lost with that to start with, but once
Yes.
you join the dots, then it is all there. And I am very aware of the power of these particular lobbying groups and the power they have over our government and, of course, the American government through AIPAC. And I've covered this with the amount of pressure that's put onto Jeremy Corbyn with all this. I mean, pretty much every week he's accused of anti-Semitism. And it's almost ridiculous with him, though, because after the Ruth Smith debacle, where she got up and started having a screaming match when Mark Wadsworth stated at the Chakrabarti inquiry that there were certain people working hand in hand with what he called the mainstream right-wing press, she decided it was all about her and threw a wobbly, but she's actually quite involved with Hope Not Hate, which is basically another hate group which targets people who are outside the fake narrative that we're given, the identity politics fake narrative. And these people are running Momentum as well through the Labour Party.
Yes, and she's ex-BICOM as well, isn't she?
Absolutely, yes. So basically you've got someone who's an agent for a foreign country.
Parachuted into a safely Labour seat, like is the case with Luciana Berger and so many other of these pro-Israeli and more often than not Jewish Labour female MPs has to be said. No, it's an absolute disgrace. And yes, you can see that on Twitter in particular. There is this dogpiling of pro-Israeli accounts who dogpile anybody who's associated with me, anybody who's my friend on Facebook who happens to be in the Labour Party, who happens to be a Labour councillor, and they find this group of dogpilers finds out these things. These people will be attacked. It happens at least once a week. It happened again yesterday. They're unbelievable.
Spreading it a bit too thinly, though, really, because when these things are investigated, they're often found to be very groundless, as it was in the Labour Party. And we've got John Landsman, who basically runs Momentum. I did a short thing called Momentum and Labour Zionism, which is worth looking at, because you have to actually look what's behind all this. And once you lift the curtain up, you find that these lobbying groups, well, they're lobbying for a foreign power, which is not, in my view, in our interest to support. And, of course, we've been through all this. We don't need to go into the bigger geopolitical picture. But you've made some very important points there. Now, what I wanted to get to also was these emails that were uncovered through a Freedom of Information request. Now, these are very revealing. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. As I said, just to brief cap, after my 2016 Edinburgh Fringe show was pulled, the police then closed this investigation, and a week later I was the one being arrested in last December. All these alleged, I was arrested on suspicion of various charges, but all these have been dropped. There was absolutely no evidence. But I was also summoned last December, a year ago, for a private prosecution brought against me for my song Survivors by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism's chairman, a man called Gideon Falter. And these Freedom of Information emails begin, in fact, the day that I uploaded my song Survivors to YouTube. Now, the CPS, they weren't able to do anything with that video because I happened to be in Switzerland when I recorded and uploaded this video. It was the 8th of June 2016, so before Edinburgh, 6 months before I was arrested, 6 months before my summons. And this trail of emails begins then with this letter from Gideon Falter to the Derbyshire Police and Crime Commissioner. And coincidentally, I'd had dealings with this gentleman's predecessor regarding my earlier troubles and difficulties with the police, they wrongly advised me, told me to write a cease and desist letter that they worded to one woman. Then I was told I'd been wrongly advised. And my MP at the time, he was Andrew Bingham. Now it's a Labour woman, I can't remember her name. But I'd had dealings with this gentleman's predecessor. The person in office now is a Punjabi gentleman by the name of Hardial Dinza. And Gideon Falter's letter of the 8th of June, I'm not going to read it all out, but it just says, obviously it's about me. My name's been redacted, but it's blah, blah, blah. I'm from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. But the letter of the 8th of June, the day that I uploaded this song, says, the suspect in this case, Alison Shablow, a resident of Derbyshire, is suspected of being a member of a particularly prolific incitement ring. And that's just completely false because...
Well, yeah, it's totally ridiculous because you're a solo artist, you're a singer-songwriter.
That's right, and politically speaking, I arrived at the point I am here and now through years of research alone, and that was supporting the Palestinian cause. Then I went, after my Cornell, I was with the French identitarian nationalist movement, Robert Faurisson, the revisionists in France for a year, before I came in contact with the English equivalent, if you like, the British equivalent. So to say that I'm part of a ring, then, clearly it's rather exaggerated.
Well, they need to do this. They need to do this to keep the threat level to bikini black. Its threat level's critical, and the rise of anti-Semitism is a threat to everyone in the country. And of course, what they're doing is they're just validating these kind of campaigns that they run against people as though there's some big network of people out there. And we see this when they use these terms like far right. And of course, all this like alt-right and far right are inventions of the media. They don't really exist. None of it really exists. It's absolute nonsense.
Yes, he goes on. Shablow is increasingly well known amongst the Jewish community.
Well, through her of him.
Yes, through her persistent work on Twitter and YouTube to incite hatred against Jewish people. For example, she has now taken to producing songs intended to be grossly offensive to Jewish people whilst inciting hatred against them. Jewish people see this and are shocked that she remains at liberty, whilst other anti-Semites see her work.
Now that's where it starts to get really sinister, Alison, because
you're writing
sinister. Sorry, it's not sinister. That's where it gets sinister. You're writing satirical songs that aren't sinister. They're in your face. They may be offensive if you take offence, but he's rather overstating it. And this is what they do all the time. These groups do that. The same with Hope Not Hate. All of a sudden, you've got OAPs being attacked because they're having a meeting about Lady Diana. Right. And someone said, oh, it's about Mossad killing Lady Diana. No, it wasn't. It was nothing to do with that. It was a fella who wrote a book and he'd produced a play about it. And he was going to talk about some new revelations that he'd got. But, of course, all these idiots turned up in masks, and they don't really know why they're there. And I think that that's really the power of these groups. In other words, they managed to kind of whir something up into the pub. They're experts at propaganda, and it's the propaganda that's very, very sinister, because all of a sudden you're linked with things that you're not really linked with. I get this as well. I've got these Antifa lunatics who will go, I'm far right. And I think one of these idiots even said I was the English Alex Jones. Well, I'm nothing like him. But they're not capable of actually any proper response. So it always has to go into this ad hominem nonsense. And I think that's the key to it, is once that can be deflated and kind of satirized, I think that would be a good area of satire. And as Gilad Atzmon states, that there's certain members of that community who suffer from pre-traumatic stress disorder. In other words, they get traumatized before anything's happened. And that's what we're talking about here, really. But carry on, because your investigation here with those emails revealed some very kind of manipulative tactics by the Campaign for Anti-Semitism, didn't it?
Yes, this is the only that was the only communication from Mr. Falter, the chairman. All the other emails, and there's 20 or so emails, are between the Police and Crime Commissioner, Mr. Dinzal's office, and the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism Director of Enforcement, Stephen Silverman, who in court papers admitted that he ran the Twitter account Bedlam Jones, which had previously been under investigation by Derbyshire Police for harassment of me. I mean, this is how absurd. And
yes,
he writes,
it all comes down to who was harassed first, I suppose. And I think it was you, wasn't it?
Several letters. Well, yes. And I think that the police records, unless they've been scrubbed, will show this. The police and crime commissioner, Sir Alison Clark, head of service compliance and engagements, replies saying, "Oh, I am sorry to hear that Alison Shablow's activities appear to be continuing, as is the commissioner, who I am keeping informed of this matter." And Silverman goes on in a letter dated 13th of May 2017. So this is 5 months after he's exposed himself in court as being a Twitter troll who's been on my back, who tweeted me first after my Cornell salute in 2015. So that's 2 years on, 2 years of harassment on Twitter from this man. This man then sees fit to write to the Derbyshire Police and Crime Commissioner to say, for example, Alison Shablow, here are these labels, Mark, Alison Shablow is a right-wing extremist and anti-Semite who, for several years, has used social media to target British Jews with some of the most extreme and vile anti-Semitism it has been my organisation's misfortune to witness. And goodness me, they are songs.
You've uploaded some comedy songs to YouTube. This is what it's about. It's about some comedy songs that you uploaded to YouTube, and all of a sudden it's an orchestrated campaign. And why are you still at liberty? Because you uploaded songs to YouTube that I don't like. Why haven't you not been locked up? It's absurd.
It's a relentless campaign. I'm a relentless soul artist, relentless campaign of incitement against British Jews. Yet. And that's the theme running through these emails, and that I've been targeting Jews. That's what my songs are. It's not as if I've been, making bombs or, finding out how to make some explosive device and go to the nearest synagogue or, I don't know, hang a leg of pork on the. I'm writing songs. Why am I being prosecuted? This is the issue here.
But there must be people in the police, Alison, who don't want to get involved in this, because they must realise that really this is about hurt feelings and trivia. And the police, I mean, I've got very little respect for them after what's happened in my experience with them. But there must be an element within them that is sick and tired of this stuff. I mean, it's so ridiculous, but it's escalating, and it's the cult of hurt feelings. And this is what we're getting with people being misgendered. None of this existed 5 years ago. It's absolutely ridiculous, and the public are falling for it. But what I don't understand is the public allow this stuff to get into their heads, and these people are still manipulating it. It doesn't matter whether it's this lobby group or that lobby group, and we know that it's all pretty much broadly connected anyway with an agenda. But I don't really understand how the police can be taking this seriously, and why police at the top, well, I've got no kind of confidence in the ones that are at the top anyway, because I've been trying to speak to them in this case that I was involved with, and they don't reply at all. But the point is that they must realise that this, at some point, this has got to backfire on the police, hasn't it? Because the public confidence in the police is already at an all-time low, as far as I can see out there. From what I hear, who
really trusts the police? I mean, I'm sure there are good elements, and many of the lower ranks, they're just average citizens who are doing the same as everybody else, paying their mortgage, making sure their kids are warmly dressed and fed, and getting to school, and all this. But yeah, the campaign against the police, when I was complaining of harassment, the police would say to me, "Oh no, well, there's no offence because you sort this material out. You sort out these abusive posts," and I can tell I've had considerable abuse. Perhaps even more than a man would get on with who shares the similar views to me. I have been the subject of particular abuse, especially since my canal, and it was in the paper in the Times of Israel. Somebody had reported me to police for my canal. That was the headline. It's not as if there was investigation. There was never any investigation of me for that canal salute by Police Scotland. But now, I mean, and this is the other thing. Silverman goes on. Listen to this in this letter. Jewish community newspapers, many thousands, I'm not sure, with many thousands of readers, there's some spelling error there. Many readers will be aware of Alison Chablot's activities and the legal proceedings against her. They will now conclude that where Jews are the victims, there are no penalties to be suffered for repeatedly and brazenly flouting the authority of the court, because he, at this point, was trying to get me in prison for breaching bail. And he admits that he's written to police over the space of 6 weeks, no less than 9 times. So that's almost twice a week he writes to police. Everything of mine that I posted on social media, I received more anonymous deliveries this summer, and that triggered me, and I put a couple of controversial songs on the internet, and I ended up being arrested again in October and being locked up for 48 hours for singing songs.
Was this because they said you'd breached your bail conditions?
Yes.
Yes, because just to clarify that, your bail conditions were that you were not meant to send anything else offensive or deemed to be offensive. Is that correct?
I wasn't supposed to post, or the bail conditions say not to post anything racist or anti-Semitic and grossly offensive. So it has to be a combination. It has to be both of those things. It has to be both anti-Semitic and grossly offensive. And as there's no definition of grossly offensive, and my song, one of the songs is clearly marked satire, even in the title. And these people, they are in a position of power and wealth. They have meetings with the Prime Minister, with the Home Secretary.
This is what I wanted to get to, Alice.
They are legitimate targets of satire, and it's been a long tradition in Britain and elsewhere in Europe that in Germany and Italy, satire is protected by the Constitution.
Absolutely.
And interestingly, in 2006, Tony Blair's government passed the Racial and Religious Hatred Act, and there was an amendment passed by the House of Lords. Rowan Atkinson was one of the people who made a great fuss about this, saying this will mean, very dangerous to theatre and comedy and satire. And this amendment, which excludes satire from this bill, which is under the Public Order Act, was passed in the House of Lords, by one vote. Yes, it was passed by one vote. So that, I think, is why I wasn't charged under this act, because satire is exempt. That's why they chose to go for the Communications Act and the grossly offensive. But who gets to decide what's grossly offensive? And if my songs are grossly offensive, then I think Ricky Gervais and Carl Pilkington are equally liable for prosecution, along with a multitude of others, of course.
Yes, I think there's an important point here, Alison, that the songs that they're complaining about are still on YouTube. So, in other words, if there was a serious concern by the judge, he would have ordered them to be taken down, surely.
Well, I don't think a British judge can do that, because YouTube is a US-based site, and they can ban your channel. But they have banned one of the songs. It has been taken down, but that's automated. In fact, all my songs are banned, irrespective of content. But I've got a ticket open with YouTube support, and they've given me their legal support email details, and I've got to write to these people now saying your videos or your censorship of my videos is based on fraudulent legal requests. We do not have any so-called Holocaust denial laws in this country. Yes, in France, Germany, these laws may exist, and you're at liberty, to follow legal requests in regard to these countries. But in the United Kingdom, it's not the case. Therefore, my work is being banned. Also, it's clearly marked as satire. So obviously I'm the target. It's not even, I would say, it's not even the message of my songs, although yes, that is important. I am the target. They want to
This is the case with all these groups, though, Alison.
Yeah.
It's always about ad hominems against the person. It's never actually about the issue. It's usually aimed at the person, because this is the way that this kind of propaganda works. But what I also wanted to get to was, you mentioned the police. They're getting drawn into this, but they're also being ingratiated into these people's mentality by being invited along to their functions. Yes. And that came across in the email. I think that's quite an important point. Could you just explain that one?
Yes. Well, after all these emails from Silverman to the police commissioner, the commissioner finally responded asking to meet somebody from the organisation, from the CAA. And there were 2 meetings that took place. The minutes are available, and all these documents are online. Anybody can go to my website. That's WordPress, alisonshablow.wordpress.com, and find the link to these documents. There are minutes of these meetings. The police commissioner and his CEO went down to Golders Green Holocaust Memorial, whatever it is, Centre, and they had 2 meetings, and they talk about, all the problems facing the Jewish community and rising anti-Semitism, and the tone of the emails is interesting. Of course, they all start off quite formally, "Dear Mr. Silverman, dear Mr. Dinser," but then, after a few emails, it's, "Oh, hi, Stephen, hi, Hardiel, hi, Peter."
They're very sickening, because they're ingratiating. Really it's ingratiating. Yes. And they whine basically, they're crawling to the police so that they can take up a further kind of a biased stance against you, really. They're actually trying to bias the police against you by doing this, because they're ingratiating themselves in with the police. Now, this is collusion. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. And that police officer should be openly kind of rebuked for this, because
they're elected politicians.
He's showing interest he's not showing impartiality.
Well, he's a Labour politician. These posts are elected, the police and crime commissioner. They're not police officers. They liaise with the public and the authorities, with the police, the regional police forces, the local police forces. But he's a Labour politician, this gentleman who was elected. Yes.
Right.
They're not police officers. They are elected politicians. Silverman is writing to this politician to get him to apply pressure on Derbyshire police. At the same time, Silverman's writing twice weekly. He writes 4 or 5 times more often to police than he's writing to Dinsel. We will get all these emails once my case is over, and perhaps
that's
even
what I meant. It's tying the whole thing together.
And I will have two cases. Yes, I will have 2 cases to bring against both the Metropolitan Police and the Derbyshire Police. That my arrest in October was absolutely extraordinary. I was handcuffed, put in a prison bus. I was made to sit in a dog van for 3 hours, driving up the motorway from London to Buxton in a van with no seat. No heating. It was cold rain. The 2 policemen in the driver's seat and the passenger seat had massive big anoraks out. I tried to complain. I was told that that's what I was deserved because I was a criminal. And I've never been convicted of any crime in 53 years on the planet, but I was a criminal and that was all I deserved. Then I was handcuffed again. I wasn't allowed to have my reading glasses. I wasn't allowed to have my lip salve. I wasn't allowed to go out in the yard. I was there for 48 hours. 48 hours. Thank God that the magistrates in Chesterfield, where I appeared, and then I had a good lawyer there, that they saw through this circus and set me free. But I was 48 hours in prison for singing songs in today's United Kingdom. And so, yes, there will be 2 cases, whether I'm acquitted or not, that this has been made clear by my barrister. There will be legal proceedings brought against both police forces for arresting me. And of course, the campaign against anti-Semitism were outside the court with their cameras to photograph me with handcuffs on, being led away by police, which they immediately posted on their website This is the kind of people we're dealing with. And to come back to the police and crime commissioner, the elected politician, yes, they had these meetings in Golders Green, and of course afterwards it's all, oh, thank you, we had a wonderful time and we understand more. And Silverman asks the police and crime commissioner if he'd be so kind to give a comment for the website and perhaps write an article for the Jewish press. So it's quite revealing that the CEO, name of David Peat, replies straight away and says, "Oh yes, we'll write a comment and tell us how many words you need for the article." And Silverman writes back and says, "Oh, we'll write it for you if you like. We'll write a draft for you if you like."
And you just sign it, yeah.
Yeah, and that is what happened. There are a couple of minor corrections, but the whole letter is written by the campaign against, the whole article is written by the campaign against anti-Semitism. There are a few minor changes. For example, the draft reads, "It was an invaluable opportunity to hear first-hand accounts from Holocaust survivors, blah, blah, blah. I saw and felt how rising anti-Semitic hate crime and its normalization had caused visceral fear." And this has been changed to caused real fear. And there was a little toning down in the Police and Crime Commissioner's version that was published.
Yes.
Of course, it's not his version, it's just the odd word that was changed. But the interesting thing about this is that, in fact, it wasn't published by the Jewish press. It appeared on a blog of the Times of Israel. Neither the Jewish Chronicle nor the Jewish News published it in the UK. And I wonder, Mark, had they been tipped off that it would not be wise to publish such an article?
There could have been a backlash there. But the point is that
there has been already, because we've got these documents. I tell you, the Ripley, I get hits on my blogs from Ripley, where the Police and Crime Commissioner's office is based. Of course, I don't know that it's him, but I imagine that there's some red cheeks about this. It's a farce. It's a complete farce. As well as the fact that I'm on these bail conditions that were imposed. Silverman also mentions this in the bail conditions imposed by the Chief Magistrate of England and Wales, a lady named Emma Arbuthnot. And she is the Chief Magistrate, but she had to recuse herself from my case because she's a member of the Friends of Israel and she went on a paid trip to Israel. She should not have been sitting in the first place in my case with that kind of conflict of interest. So that the judiciary have already had one immense humiliation with this lady's recusal. That was March last year. Case is still ongoing. By the time I get to the magistrates on the 10th of January, it will have been ongoing since November, so that's 14 months. Perhaps it won't even end then. Obviously, if I'm found guilty, then we will appeal. I could be found not guilty on the facts, but still the points of law regarding sending. And this is the interesting thing about this case, is that the sending or the causing to be sent of a grossly offensive message would, if these points of law are accepted, and the judge has already indicated that he would accept these points of law. All I did was share a URL, and a URL is a jumble, www.youtube.com/ with a number of numbers and letters. There's nothing grossly offensive in that URL as it stands. That's all I did. The people who sent the message onto the internet were YouTube. And in fact, the people who caused the message to be sent were those complaining about me because they clicked play, and that sent the message to them, to their computer. So
ultimately this isn't going to do the CPS much good.
It will chill. If it passes,
it will go against the CPS.
It will chill free speech to totally unacceptable levels. It'll be worse than Soviet Russia. It'll be worse than the most totalitarian regimes that exist in history. We would be at that stage. I mean, already censoring an artist. Isn't that supposed to be why Israel was created because the Nazis censored all these artists. I tell you, the Israelis don't censor their artists. There's a satirical show called The Jews Are Coming, broadcast on Israeli TV. They mock the Holocaust. There's an Israeli artist goes by the name of Natalie Vaxberg Cohen. Look her up on Google. She has a skit where she dresses as the Holocaust in a pink mini dress and a crown and goes to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem and says, oh, without me, you wouldn't have a country. Without me, you wouldn't have an army. Then she goes to the Berlin Memorial and stands in vulgar poses. Oh, she's supposedly a pro-Palestinian, this artist, I must add. Stands in vulgar poses with her hands down her pants at the Berlin Shoah Memorial. And nothing happens to this woman because really the Israelis can't be seen to be censoring artists, can they? That's the reason why, one of the reasons why Israel exists, because Nazi Germany censored artists and didn't allow artists to have freedom of expression. So Israel can't be seen to do that to its own artists.
They're going to allow decadence.
They have a Holocaust denial law, but these people aren't. The Jews Are Coming. This TV show, they're not being prosecuted. They're screened on national TV. Whereas Alison Shablow in the UK, in the country where she was born and where her ancestors over generations have lived, and I'm a product of that. I am being persecuted in my own country by a foreign lobbying group, and I'm having my voice silenced as an artist. Someone on YouTube said today, oh, in a sane world, Alison, you'd be on the One Show. Well, I'm not on the One Show, but I am up in court for singing songs.
Well, this is the thing, but I keep saying
the absurdity of it.
Yeah, I know it's absurd, but I keep saying to people that unless you've come up against the system, a lot of people are walking around in a daze and they don't realise that we live in a communist country. And we followed the Communist Manifesto, and it's everywhere. And you only have to look at Soviet defectors and what they tell you, and everything that they tell you about Soviet subversion and the takeover of things through the communist plan is happening. It happens on every level. We talk about it all the time. So the public are generally unaware of all of this until it hits them. And of course, because they watch mainstream television, they don't get an inkling of it. They don't even understand it. They've got no bearing on it. There's actually no reference to it. So unless they step outside the box and see it, then they won't see it. But it's just hypnotism. It's magic, really. And this is what they're doing to you. It's a kind of misdirection and magic. But it's what they're doing is, by implication, and using very sinister and underhand tactics, they're making themselves look quite bad, really. But the point is that they rely on the media putting just one side over. If it's really deflated, like you're saying, there's a certain type of satire that's allowed, and that's what I was getting to earlier on. In other words, it's about how they view it in context, how these groups view the type of satire. So you could go to see, there's that video on YouTube of an 8-year-old drag queen with this horrible old drag artist swearing, using bad language in front of an 8-year-old kid and saying that he's effing gorgeous and adorable, but that's not offensive, you see. Now the thing is that's offensive, I would say, to 99% of people, but their voices are silenced. So the 99% are not allowed to say anything, because these created groups are given status as victims. And this is the whole idea behind all of the subversion that's going on. And it's classic Soviet subversion. We're going to have to wrap it up there, Alison. But
that's fine. Just one quick thing is that the media, apart from my very first hearing on the 15th of December last year, so just a year ago now, they said nothing about the mainstream has said nothing about me being imprisoned, about a British woman. The British press, ostensibly there to inform the British public about what's going on in Britain, have not said a word. So there we are again. You're right. How can the British people make any kind of decision when they're not informed?
But not given the
but we have
so
people like you. We have people like you, Mark, to keep us informed of what's really going on. So thanks very much for having me.
Windows on the World live every Sunday, 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Join me, Mark Windows, and Tony Hurst. Join the conversation in our chat box and also catch up with life-changing information on our continuous programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.